Nebraska, winter of 1879. The wind howled like it carried unfinished prayers. Caleb Thorne hadn't spoken to a soul in weeks. His land sat quiet under a foot of snow, the windows of his cabin glowing soft with firelight. A man like him, once husband, once father, had long since chosen solitude over company, especially during storms, especially in winter. That night the blizzard came hard, the kind that makes fences vanish and roads disappear. Caleb bolted the door, poured black coffee, and stirred the fire. He figured nothing living would dare knock. Then came the sound. 3 sharp knocks. Not wind, not tree branch. Knuckles. Human. He froze. No one came this far out. Not in weather like this. He reached for his rifle, opened the door slow, and there she was. A woman, late 20s maybe, drenched in snow, coat too thin for the cold, a bundle clutched tight to her chest. She didn't speak. Her eyes met his, wide, haunted, and unsure if she'd just found mercy or mistake. Then she collapsed, cut to black. The fire crackles. Her breath rises shallow under quilt and lantern light. Caleb's hands work fast. Boots off, dry socks, heated water. He's done this before. Not recently, not since. He pauses at her satchel. It had nearly slipped from her hand when she fell. Not meaning to pry, just checking for wounds, he opens it. Inside, a single piece of parchment, a marriage certificate. Name, Elise Morrow. Groom, Caleb Thorne. He stares. He's never met her. Never signed that paper, never spoke that name. But there it was, her trembling hand clutching it even in sleep, as if her life depended on being someone's wife. His. The storm outside grows louder, but inside the cabin, something else begins. A slow unraveling of silence, identity, and choice. In the morning she wakes. "Where am I?" she whispers. "You're safe," Caleb says. "For now." She nods but doesn't look at him. Her voice is soft, cracked from cold and fear. "Please, don't send me back." He doesn't ask who, he doesn't ask why, but he knows. This storm isn't just weather. It's something chasing her, and it's not done yet. What would you do if a stranger carried your name before she ever knew your face? Stay close. This story's just getting started. The next morning, the sky outside had turned the color of old pewter. The storm had slowed but left the land ghostly white, quiet, buried, still. Inside, the cabin breathed heat and wood smoke. Caleb sat at the table, sharpening his knife in long, even strokes. Behind him, the girl stirred. She rose slowly, blanket wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was damp, her lips cracked. Caleb turned but said nothing. He didn't offer coffee, not yet. She needed silence first. Some folks do. Then quietly she spoke. "Elise," she said, her voice paper thin. "My name's Elise." Caleb gave a slow nod, eyes on the knife, still drawing the steel. She hesitated. "I didn't sign that paper." He looked up. She pointed to the certificate, now folded on the table. "Someone else did. But it's real. The marshal thinks I'm married. To you." Caleb didn't flinch. "And are you?" "No," she said too fast, then softer. "But I needed to be. I had to belong to someone. Just to disappear." That stuck with him. Outside, a raven landed on the fence post, black against the white. Elise stood, moved to the fire, and held out her hands. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thick, heavy like snow on a barn roof. "You have folks in town?" she asked. "No," Caleb said. "Not anymore." She nodded, like she already knew. In the next days, the snow wouldn't let up. Roads vanished. Town became a rumor, nothing more than lights down the valley that flickered and disappeared. Elise didn't talk much, but her hands stayed busy. She sewed a tear in his coat, folded his laundry without asking, boiled oats and dried apples without fuss. She moved through the house like she'd been there before, but with care, like someone trying not to leave footprints. At night, he caught her staring at the fire. One hand curled around a small cloth bundle she kept tied to her waist. She never opened it. He didn't ask. Then came the third night. Caleb woke to the sound of movement. Not the wind this time. This was close. He reached for the shotgun, moved slow. From the window he saw nothing. But there were tracks in the snow. Hoof prints. Someone had ridden up, then rode off. Elise stood in the kitchen, already awake. She held the shotgun with both hands, backward. Caleb took it gently. "Did you see them?" she asked. "No, but they saw us." She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the table and untied the cloth bundle she always held. Inside was a child's ribbon, stained with something brown, and a silver button. "Voss," she whispered. "Luther Voss. He took me from Missouri. Said if I didn't marry someone on paper, I'd be taken for good. I signed nothing. He forged it, and he's coming." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Elise," he said, "if that man's riding this way and you stay here, you're putting me in the middle." "I know," she said, "but if I leave, he'll find someone else. Someone younger." She paused. "I want this name to mean something, not just hide me." Caleb stared into the fire. The room had gone still again. Outside, the wind had picked up. Inside, the cabin had never felt warmer and never more dangerous. The next morning, Caleb rode into town for supplies. The general store clerk, Tom Densby, looked up. "Storm's not your style, Thorne. You finally get tired of being alone?" Caleb didn't answer. But later that night, when he pulled up to his own gate, he found something hanging from the post, a strip of red cloth, Elise's ribbon. He ran inside. She was gone. The fire still burned. Her coat still hung by the door. But the marriage certificate? Gone. And on the table, one note scratched in charcoal. "Let me protect you for once." Cut to black. What would you do if the stranger who carried your name disappeared into the dark just to keep it clean? Stay with me. The dawn is coming. The ribbon swayed on the fence post, stiff with frost. Caleb didn't waste time. He threw a saddle on his bay gelding, gritted against the wind, and rode hard toward town. The snow was crusted now, easier to track. Her boot prints ran toward the old sawmill road, a narrow pass, unprotected. The sun dipped behind gray ridgelines as he rode. By the time he spotted movement, night had started swallowing the valley. 2 riders, 1 wagon. He slowed, stuck to the trees. The wagon was tarped, pulled by 2 tired mules. On the bench sat a man in a black coat, reins in one hand, shotgun across his lap. And beside him, Elise, hands bound in her lap, chin high like a woman refusing to beg. Caleb's breath hitched. That was Voss. He'd seen the man once, years back, bragging in a saloon, slapping a girl like she owed him her voice. Now he had Elise, and he was headed toward the canyon pass, where Marshal Simmons held court once a month. A man like Voss knew how to make it legal. Caleb watched, waited, then turned the horse back toward town. He didn't head to the law. He didn't ride to the saloon. He went to one man, Hatch. Doc Hatch still kept his lantern lit after dark. When he opened the door and saw Caleb, he just stepped aside. "She's in trouble," Caleb said. "He's got her papers. Says she's mine. But he's taking her south to make it true." Hatch nodded once. "She came to me once. Quiet girl. Said if she died, tell the truth. You still want that name on her?" Caleb looked him square. "I want it to mean something." They rode together. Back at the pass, Voss made camp under a bluff. Fire crackled. Elise sat by the flames, eyes hollow, lips sealed. Her wrists bore rope marks. She'd run once, they'd caught her. This time she waited. Then, hooves, 1 rider. Calm. Voss stood, gun drawn. "Who's that?" Caleb stepped from the dark. "I believe you got something of mine," Voss scoffed. "She's signed. You want to fight over a piece of paper?" "No," Caleb said, "but I'll fight over her." Elise didn't speak, but her eyes, wet with firelight, said everything. Voss raised his weapon. That's when Hatch fired. The shot cracked like dry timber. Voss's gun spun from his hand. Hatch emerged from behind a cedar, shotgun smoking. "Evening," the doctor said. "Thought you could use a witness." Caleb stepped forward. Elise stood too. She pulled the marriage paper from Voss's coat, ripped it in 2, then turned to Caleb. "If I take your name," she said, "I want it to be my choice." And in front of fire, snow, and sky, she reached for his hand. Caleb didn't answer with words. He just held it. Back in town, the marshal tried to ask questions. Caleb just said, She's safe now. That's all that matters. Voss rode out of town with a broken hand and silence chasing him. That night, Elise sat beside the fire again, her coat off, her voice steady. You saved me before I even knew your name, she whispered. Caleb looked at her long. You carried mine before I ever earned yours. She smiled. Outside, the snow melted just enough to reveal the earth beneath. Dark, rich, ready. Sometimes a man doesn't choose a fight. Sometimes he chooses what's worth standing in front of. And sometimes a name becomes a promise. Would you risk your name for someone who never asked to carry it? Stay close. Dawn's coming soon. The day after Voss rode out with a broken hand, the sun cracked through the clouds for the first time in nearly a week. Snow melted off the rooftops of Aspen Creek. Icicles wept from eaves. The whole valley shimmered in that pale gold light that only comes after a storm has had its say. Elise stood by the cabin window, watching it all. Caleb watched her. She wore her hair pulled back, the same ribbon Voss once tore from her coat now tied at her nape. It wasn't defiance, it was memory reclaimed. Caleb walked to the stove, poured her coffee. You think he's gone for good? She asked. No, he said, but I don't think he'll be the one knocking next. She turned. Then who? He didn't answer. That afternoon, a writer came from town. Young Ben Morrow, the postmaster's boy. He handed Caleb a folded notice with the marshal's seal. Public hearing, 3 o'clock. Thorne and Morrow to present claim. Caleb read it once, then again. They're calling it a hearing, he muttered, but it smells like a trap. Elise read over his shoulder. They want us to explain how I became your wife. She said the word with no tremble now. Caleb looked at her. We don't owe them nothing. Elise folded the paper. I want to speak. I want to finish it myself. He didn't stop her. The sky turned copper that evening. The town bell rang at 2:45. By 3 o'clock, half of Aspen Creek had gathered near the steps of the chapel, doubling now as courthouse and public square. Marshal Simmons stood on the porch, arms folded. Next to him, Luther Voss had returned, bandaged and bitter. Caleb arrived with Elise at his side, not holding hands, but close enough to mean something. Whispers stirred. She's the girl from Missouri. Did she really forge that paper? Thorne don't speak much, but he brought her here. Marshall raised a hand. Town of Aspen Creek calls Caleb Thorne and Elise Morrow to speak on the matter of falsified marriage claims, unlawful sheltering, and the possession of legal property under another's name. Before Caleb could step forward, Elise did. She climbed the steps alone. My name is Elise Morrow, she said. And no, I did not forge anything. That paper was real. It just wasn't mine to sign. The marshal squinted. So you admit it was false? I admit it was forced. Gasps. She looked at Voss. You wanted a name on paper so you could move me like freight. So I ran. And when I fell into the snow, I carried the only name that might keep me alive. She turned to the crowd. But I stayed for another reason. Because kindness doesn't always knock. Sometimes it opens the door without asking for anything back. Silence. A warm wind moved through the street. Caleb stepped beside her. I never asked for her to carry my name, he said, but I won't let anyone take it off her now. The marshal looked between them. So what do you claim here? Elise held Caleb's hand. We claim each other, she said. That's when the bell tower tolled. No one knew who rang it, but the sound silenced every doubt. Old Reverend Mathers stepped from the crowd. If they claim each other, he said, then let them write it together, this time by choice. He handed them a blank certificate. Elise signed first, Caleb second. Then she spoke again. This time I carry his name, not because it was written for me, but because I choose to wear it. The crowd watched. Not one person spoke against them, not even Voss. He turned silent and walked away. And the town for once didn't follow. Because some fights aren't loud. Some victories are quiet, steady, warm. And this one, it felt like sunrise. Would you step into the fire to protect someone who carried your name before you earned it? Don't go. The last part's coming, and it's worth staying for. That night, after the papers were signed and the crowd dispersed, Caleb and Elise didn't ride straight home. They walked. The snow was thinner now, soft underfoot. Moonlight traced silver across the rooftops of Aspen Creek, and the town seemed quieter than usual, like even the buildings were exhaling. No one said a word to them, not because they weren't seen, but because they were finally seen right. When they reached the cabin, Caleb opened the door and stepped aside, the way he did that first night. Elise crossed the threshold not as a guest, not as a stranger, not as a secret, but as someone who had chosen to stay. The fire was still going. Elise fed at a log. Caleb poured her tea. Familiar motions, now permanent. He reached above the mantel, pulled down a wooden plank he'd been carving for weeks. He held it up. Burned into it were two words: "Welcome home." She smiled, not the shy kind, the kind that meant roots had been planted. They hung the sign above the door together. Later, Caleb went out back. Snow had melted enough to see bare ground along the fence. He knelt, cleared a spot, and planted something small, wrapped in cloth, taken from Elise's satchel. A peach pit. From Missouri. "You think it'll grow?" Elise asked behind him. He stood, turned. "Don't matter. It's got a place now." That was the thing about this land. It didn't promise growth. It promised the chance. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt the cabin porch. Elise painted the door blue. Caleb carved a second rocking chair. Every day was simple, not quiet. There was always a dog barking, a fence breaking, a stove that needed coaxing. But it was peaceful. One morning, Elise found an old Bible tucked under the floorboards, Caleb's wife's name written inside the front cover. She didn't ask. She just left a page blank in the back. Her name would come later. They held no wedding, no preacher, no witnesses. But when Elise stood at the edge of the town's spring social weeks later, and someone asked who she was, she simply said, "I'm Mrs. Thorne." And no one doubted it, because some unions are born in churches, others in storms. One evening, as dusk curled around the hills, Caleb sat with Hatch by the porch. They watched the town in the distance, lights flickering like fireflies. "Funny," Hatch said, sipping from his flask. "You always hated being looked at." "I still do," Caleb said. "But it's different now. They ain't looking through me anymore." Hatch nodded. "She gave you that." Caleb glanced through the window, where Elise was humming over the stove. "No, she reminded me I had it all along." Inside, the fire kept burning. It didn't rage, it didn't flicker desperate. It held, like something that wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in years, Caleb didn't feel like he was just surviving winter. He was living through it. Would you open your door to a stranger if she carried your name before you ever spoke hers? Or would you walk away and miss the kind of love that chooses you, not because it has to, but because it wants to? Some stories end with fireworks. Others end with a light that just never goes out. Thanks for staying through the storm. Now tell us, what would you have done? Not every story out here ends in gunfire or glory. Some end quietly, over a warm fire, a second chair, and a name spoken by choice, not force. This wasn't a tale of war. It was a tale of staying, of choosing decency when no one's watching, and standing beside someone not because the world told you to, but because you knew they'd do the same for you. Sometimes, the strongest kind of love is the one that begins with a knock and ends with a name carried with pride. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe kindness still matters, even out in a world this wild, hit that like button to keep stories like this alive. Drop a comment below. Would you have opened that door, or would you have walked away? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got more true-hearted Western tales coming your way, about the kind of courage that doesn't wear a badge, but sure as hell leaves a mark. Stay with us. The West still has stories worth telling.